Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you're new here, this is the show where we don't just skim the headlines. We take a stack of materials, articles, manuscripts, research notes, and we really try to get to the bottom of it.
Right, we want the whole picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We want to understand the why and the how, not just the what. And today, we have something that I think is going to be genuinely challenging for a lot of us.
Challenging is definitely the right word. It's also, well, it's foundational.
Yeah. So we are looking at a manuscript of a sermon delivered by Dr. Joshua Nichols. He is a PhD and a pastor, so he brings that scholar-practitioner blend that we usually really like here.
It's the best of both worlds, really. The deep academic rigor, but applied to actual everyday life.
Right. And this is from a series he's doing called From Guilt to Glory, which is a walk through the book of Romans.
Specifically, we are zooming in, way in on just 2 verses today. Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17.
And before we dive into the deep end here, I want to set the context for the source material because it's important. This comes to us from Faithful to the Word Ministries. Dr. Nichols has built a pretty incredible library of resources over there.
Massive. It's a goldmine.
It really is. So if you find yourself scratching your head during this deep dive, or if you just want to read the source text yourself, you need to head over to faithfultotheword.com.
Highly recommend doing that.
Yeah, and I'll mention this up front because it matters. Faithful to the Word Ministries is a 501c3 organization. We're going to be talking about some heavy lifting they do in terms of content creation, and, well, that doesn't happen for free.
No, it certainly doesn't.
So if you value this kind of deep theological work, you can actually make a donation right there on the website to support them.
Absolutely. It keeps the lights on and the content flowing.
All right, so let's get into the room. Dr. Nichols starts this session with an image that I found really striking because it's so, well, honestly, it's so boring. Well, mundane, unimpressive. He asks us to imagine holding a seed, just a single dry seed in the palm of your hand.
Ah, right, the seed metaphor.
Yeah. Maybe it's an acorn or kernel of wheat.
Okay.
And he makes the point that if you look at it, it just looks dead. It feels like a pebble.
It's hard.
Right? There's no pulse, no warmth, no movement. It's just this hard, dry little casing.
It's what he calls the seed paradox.
Exactly. Because if you didn't know what it was, you'd throw it away. You could carry a pocket full of them and feel like you're carrying nothing but dust.
It's just dirt.
And here's the turn. If you take that dry little casing and you bury it in the dirt and let the rain hit it and let the sun warm the soil,
Suddenly you have a tree.
you have something massive. You have life exploding out of what literally looked like a rock.
It's the ultimate contrast, really, between appearance and reality. The appearance is total weakness, but the reality is infinite potential. And Dr. Nichols uses that to frame the entire conversation today about the gospel.
Which is where we need to park for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think in our modern context, especially if you grew up around church, the word gospel just sounds like, I don't know, wallpaper.
Yeah, it's background noise.
It's just a religious word you hear all the time. But Dr. Nichols is arguing that in the first century, the gospel looked exactly like that dry seed. It looked entirely unimpressive.
Unimpressive is putting it mildly. To understand why Paul, the author of Romans, writes what he writes, we have to transport ourselves back to the first century. We really have to go to Rome.
Let's set that scene. Because when we say Rome today, we think of, ruins. We think of the Colosseum as a tourist trap where you take selfies.
Right, but in Paul's day, Rome wasn't ruins. It was the center of the universe. It was the absolute apex of human civilization.
The peak.
Imagine walking into a city of gleaming white marble. You have temples that are architectural marvels. You have aqueducts bringing fresh water from miles away.
Which was technology that wouldn't be matched for, 1,000 years?
Exactly. And you have the Roman legions, the most terrifying and efficient military machine in history, keeping the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome.
Which was basically peace through superior firepower.
Very much so. Step out of line and you're crushed. And at the top of this whole pyramid, you have Caesar. And Caesar wasn't just a president or a king. By this time in history, the emperor was worshipped as an actual god. Divus Iulius, the savior of the world.
So Rome is the city of winners. It's the city of power, of philosophy, rhetoric, glory.
And into this massive city of marble and steel walks Paul, and what is he carrying? He's carrying a message about a Jewish carpenter from a backwater province called Judea.
A carpenter who didn't lead an army.
Didn't write a philosophy book.
Right. And who was executed by the Roman state on a cross-o fish, which, let's be honest, was the most shameful, humiliating way to die.
It was reserved for the lowest of the low. slaves and rebels.
It does sound ridiculous when you put it that way.
It sounded absolutely foolish. In fact, that's the exact word Paul uses in Corinthians. To the Greeks, who loved logic and philosophy and debate, this story was quote-unquote foolishness.
Yeah, to the Jews.
To the Jews, who wanted a conquering Messiah to kick out the Romans and restore their nation, a crucified Messiah was a stumbling block. It was deeply offensive.
So Paul is walking into basically the Super Bowl of human achievement, and he's trying to tell a story about a guy who lost.
From the world's perspective, yes, he lost horribly. And that is exactly why the opening of this text is so shocking. We are looking at Romans chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. And Paul looks at all that Roman glory, all those legions, all that marble, and he says, quote, "I am not ashamed of the gospel."
I am not ashamed.
Mhm.
That is the mission statement for this deep dive today. We really need to figure out why.
Yeah, what's his secret?
Because, honestly, I think I would be. If I had to go to the smartest people at Harvard or the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. today and tell them that the answer to the world's complex geopolitical problems is a peasant who died 2,000 years ago, I mean, I'd feel a little awkward.
We all would. It's human nature to want to sound smart. And Dr. Nichols breaks this down into 4 pillars. He calls them gospel courage, gospel capacity, gospel coverage, and gospel content.
Okay, those are the 4 reasons why Paul refused to blink.
Exactly.
So let's start with the first one, gospel courage. The text says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel." And Dr. Nichols points out a nuance here that I totally missed my first time through. Paul doesn't say, "I am proud of the gospel." He says, "I am not ashamed."
It is a subtle difference, but it's crucial. Saying I am proud is just stating a feeling, but saying I am not ashamed implies a resistance.
Like pushing back.
Right. It implies that there is a force pushing against you. It suggests that the environment is actively trying to make you ashamed.
Like the social pressure is this heavy wind blowing right in your face, and you're having to lean into it.
Precisely. Paul is acknowledging that everything in Rome, the culture, the intellect, the power structure, is screaming at him to be embarrassed. They are screaming, keep that quiet. That's a primitive superstition. That's for poor people and slaves. Don't bring that garbage into the Senate.
I think that resonates today, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
Dr. Nichols brings this right into the modern context. We might not have Roman centurions walking around, but we have sophistication.
We have a lot of sophistication. Think about the modern workplace or the university campus. There is a palpable pressure to view biblical faith as something, quaint.
Or backwards.
Or maybe even dangerous, yeah. And the pressure isn't usually violent in our context. It's social. It's the raised eyebrow in the break room. It's the smirk. It's the fear of being labeled anti-intellectual or on the wrong side of history.
So the temptation for us is to whisper, to sort of edit the message, to say, well, I'm a Christian, but I'm not like those Christians.
Yeah. Exactly. We try to make it palatable. We try to smooth out all the rough edges so we don't get laughed at dinner parties. But Paul refuses to do that. And Dr. Nichols reminds us of who Paul actually was, because he wasn't some uneducated guy who just didn't know any better.
Right. He had a resume, a big one.
He had a massive resume. He was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He studied under Gamaliel, who was basically the Ivy League professor of Jerusalem at the time.
He was a scholar.
Paul was brilliant. He knew Greek philosophy. He quoted their own poets to them in Athens. He knew exactly how dumb the gospel sounded to the cultural elites. He wasn't oblivious to it. He was convinced, despite it.
And Dr. Nichols uses an analogy here that I really love. He calls it the oil strike.
Oh, this is a great way to visualize it. Imagine a farmer. He's been dirt poor his whole entire life. His land is dry, dusty, basically useless. His neighbors kind of pity him. He wears ragged clothes. He's a nobody in the town.
Okay, I can picture him just struggle to get by.
But one day, while he's out digging a fence post, he strikes oil, a massive bubbling geyser of crude oil. He suddenly realizes he is sitting on millions and millions of dollars worth of resources. Now, here's the question Dr. Nichols poses. When he walks into town the next day to go to the bank, is he ashamed?
No way.
Is he worried about his ragged clothes? Is he worried that his neighbors still think he's a nobody?
No, he's probably grinning from ear to ear, strutting even.
Why?
Because he knows what he has.
Exactly. The value of the possession totally overrides the opinion of the public. If you are holding a cure for cancer, or a winning lottery ticket, or the deed to a massive oil field, you do not care if people think you look silly. You have the treasure.
So Paul looks at the gospel, this story about a crucified carpenter that looks so weak to Rome, and he doesn't see a dry seed. He sees the oil.
He sees the infinite value. And that is the secret to gospel courage. It's not about trying to be a tough guy. It's not about just developing thick skin or taking assertiveness training. It's about value assessment. If you are embarrassed by the gospel, Dr. Nichols would argue it's because you haven't realized what it's actually worth yet. You still see the dry seed. You don't see the tree inside it.
That is a heavy hit.
Yeah.
It really shifts the problem from, I'm just too shy to talk about my faith to, I don't actually value this enough.
It does. It makes it a theological issue, not a personality issue.
Yeah.
And that naturally leads us right into the second pillar, because we have to ask, what is that value? What makes this message so powerful that it's worth the social cost?
Right. And that brings us to gospel capacity.
Yes. Paul writes, "For it is the power of God for salvation."
We need to geek out on the Greek for just a second here, because the word Paul uses for power is dynamis.
Dynamis. And I feel like every youth pastor in America has done the whole, hey kids, that's where we get the word dynamite, implying that the gospel is this huge explosion.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard that sermon a dozen times.
Right. And it's a common connection. Linguistically, it's true. Alfred Nobel did use that Greek root word to name his explosive. But Dr. Nichols offers a really important correction here for us. When we think of dynamite, what do we naturally think of?
We think of blowing stuff up, destruction, chaos.
Yeah.
Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote pushing the plunger.
Exactly. It's violent, destructive energy. It levels buildings. But in the Bible, the power of God is almost never destructive in that sense. It is creative. It is generative.
Give me an example of that.
Well, think of Genesis chapter 1. God speaks into the dark, empty, void, and bang, light, order, life. That is dynamis. Or think of the resurrection. Jesus is cold, dead, wrapped in grave clothes in a tomb. The power of God enters and reverses death itself. It creates life where there was none.
So the gospel isn't a bomb that destroys culture. It's a creative power that brings dead things back to life.
Beautifully said, yes.
Wow.
And Paul says this power is in the gospel.
This is a critical point from the sermon. The power is not in the preacher. It's not in the eloquence of the argument. It's not in the cool lighting at the church service or the fog machine. The power resides in the message itself.
Dr. Nichols uses the ambulance analogy here, and I think this is so profoundly helpful for anyone listening who feels inadequate.
It really is the antidote to imposter syndrome in evangelism.
Think about an ambulance. Its entire job is to get a critically dying patient to the hospital. Now imagine you are the driver of that ambulance.
Okay, my hands are on the wheel, sirens blaring.
Does the patient in the back need you, the driver, to be a certified mechanic? Do they need you to be able to pull over and explain how the internal combustion engine of the van works?
No, they just need me to drive the van.
Right. Do they need you to be a cardiovascular surgeon? Do they need you to be able to fix their heart condition right there on the side of the road with a pocket knife?
No, I'm just the transport. I'm just getting them to the surgeon.
Exactly. And most importantly, does the patient even need to be fully conscious or understand the exact GPS route you are taking? No. They just need to be in the vehicle. Why? Because the vehicle is the means of rescue.
So in this analogy, the gospel is the ambulance.
Yes. The message that Jesus died for sinners and rose again is the vehicle that carries the power of God. You, the believer, the person talking to your coworker, you are just the driver.
I think a lot of listeners, and honestly me too, we get paralyzed because we think we have to be the surgeon.
We do.
We think, I can't talk to my neighbor about God because he's a biology professor and he's really smart. He's going to ask me about evolution or the problem of evil or why the church has done bad things in history, and I won't know the answer. I'll look dumb.
And those are valid questions. People are going to ask them.
Yeah.
But Dr. Nichols is saying you are overestimating your role. You do not have to save the person. You don't have to win the debate or have a PhD in ancient history. You just have to bring the ambulance. Paul says later in Romans, faith comes from hearing. Notice he doesn't say faith comes from hearing a really clever philosophical takedown. It comes from hearing the good news, the story.
So the pressure is entirely off.
Yeah.
The power is in the seed, not the farmer. The power is in the ambulance, not the driver.
Correct. And look at what this power actually achieves. It is the power of God for salvation.
Let's unpack that word salvation for a minute, because again, it's one of those Christian wallpaper words, soteria in the Greek.
Yeah.
What does it actually entail?
It means comprehensive rescue. I think sometimes we view salvation as just a ticket.
Like a boarding pass.
Right. Like, okay, I prayed a prayer at a summer camp when I was 7. I got my ticket stamped, and now I'm just waiting around to go to heaven when I die. It's basically fire insurance.
It's entirely about the afterlife.
But soteria is so much bigger than that. Dr. Nichols describes it as a trajectory, a timeline. It saves you from the penalty of sin, that's your past guilt, the ledger being wiped clean. But then it also saves you from the power of sin, that's your present. That's your current struggle, your addiction, your anger issues, your chronic selfishness. It gives you power to fight those today. And eventually it saves you from the presence of sin. That's the future glory when all things are made new. It is a total ground-up reconstruction of the human being.
So it's not just getting you into heaven, it's getting heaven into you right now.
That is a great way to put it. It's the power to take a spiritually dead heart and make it beat again.
Okay, so we have courage, we're not ashamed. We have capacity. The message actually works. Now let's talk about gospel coverage. Who exactly is this ambulance for?
Paul says, to everyone who believes.
Everyone. That's a huge word.
It is a radically democratic word in a very, very undemocratic world. You have to remember the historical context here. The ancient world was built entirely on walls and divisions.
You had Romans and barbarians.
Masters and slaves, men and women, and the biggest, thickest wall of all, Jews and Greeks.
Let's talk about that divide, because the text says, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. Why does Paul make that distinction? It almost sounds like a contradiction to the everyone part.
It does sound like that to modern ears. But this was the Grand Canyon of the first century. The Jews were the covenant people. They had the law of Moses, the temple in Jerusalem, the prophets. They were the insiders with God.
And the Greeks.
The Greeks, meaning all the Gentiles, the rest of the world, were the outsiders. They were considered unclean. They worshipped pagan gods. They didn't have that thousands of years history with the God of Abraham.
So when Paul says to the Jew first, is he saying God likes them better? Like they have VIP access to the ambulance?
That is the common misconception. But Dr. Nichols clarifies this beautifully in the sermon. It is not a hierarchy of value or affection. It is a hierarchy of history or redemptive order.
How so? Break that down.
Think about the storyline of the Bible. God calls Abraham out of nowhere. He creates a family. He rescues them from Egypt and gives them the law through Moses. He sends the prophets to Israel to warn them and guide them. And finally, the Messiah Jesus is born as a Jewish man from the line of David in Bethlehem.
So historically, the Jewish people were the delivery mechanism for the Messiah.
Exactly. The message went to Jerusalem first because that was the staging ground, but the absolute scandal of Paul's message, the thing that literally got him beaten with rods and thrown in prison, was the second part of that sentence, and also to the Greek.
And he was saying the wall is coming down.
Yes, the ambulance picks up everyone now. It doesn't matter if you have the heritage or the right last name or the religious background.
And the only condition to get in the ambulance is belief.
To everyone who believes. And Dr. Nichols gives us a really helpful definition of belief or faith right here, because that's another confusing word. He calls faith the empty hand.
I really like that image. Can you expand on it? What does the empty hand mean?
Well, we naturally often turn faith into a work. We think faith means trying really, really hard to convince myself that this invisible thing is true.
Like mental gymnastics.
Right, or we think it's an emotional state where we feel really spiritual and peaceful. But the biblical concept of faith is just receptivity. It's just opening your hand to receive a gift from someone else.
You can't receive a gift if your hand is balled up in a fist.
Mm-hmm.
Or if your hand is already full of your own stuff, your own achievements.
Exactly. Faith is simply the admission that you desperately need the gift and the willingness to just take it. It is not an athletic feat. It's resting on what Christ has already done.
Dr. Nichols tells a story here to illustrate this idea of coverage. The story of the town reputation.
Yeah, this is a classic narrative. Imagine a small town, and in this town, there is a guy who has the reputation. You know the exact guy I'm talking about.
The guy everyone warns their kids about.
Right. Maybe he's the town drunk. Maybe he's violent, always getting into fights. Maybe he's just mean and bitter. He curses at the church people when they walk by his porch. He is the guy that all the good, respectable people have totally written off. They say, don't bother with him. He's a lost cause. He's way too far gone.
The ambulance is definitely not going to stop at his house.
That's what human logic says. But in the story, a minister goes to visit him anyway. He walks up onto that porch, sits in the guy's messy, chaotic kitchen. He deals with all the awkwardness and hostility, and he just tells him the story of the gospel. He tells him about the cross, and the man breaks down and believes.
The gospel didn't run a background check on him.
That is the key. The gospel didn't say, hold on, let me see your credit score. It didn't say, let me see your moral report card for the last 10 years. It just saved him. The empty hand was enough.
This challenges me, honestly. Because I think we all have a mental list of people we think are savable and people we think are too far gone.
Oh, we absolutely do. We look at the angry, mocking atheist on social media, or the corrupt politician on the news, or even the relative who has hurt us deeply, and we think, not them. They'd never listen.
But Paul says everyone. The ambulance has a worldwide coverage map.
No dead zones. Which brings us to the final and probably most important tiller, gospel content.
Okay, so we know the message works. That's capacity. We know it's for everyone. That's coverage. But what actually is the message? What are the mechanics of it?
Verse 17, for in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith.
Dr. Nichols calls this the engine room of the Book of Romans.
It is the engine room.
Yeah.
And historically, this specific verse is the match that lit the Protestant Reformation. This is the vice that totally changed Martin Luther's life, and by extension, changed Western history.
But the phrase righteousness of God, I mean, it sounds intimidating.
It should be intimidating. Because of the universal dilemma, Dr. Nichols sets this up as a strict logical problem. Let's look at premise A. God is perfectly holy. He is entirely righteous. That means he loves everything that is good, but it also means he must actively hate evil. He cannot just shrug at injustice or sweep it under the rug. He has to be a good judge.
Okay, that makes sense. A judge who lets criminals go isn't a good judge. So God is the perfect judge.
Now, premise B. Human beings are not righteous. We are flawed. We are selfish. We hurt people. We lie. As Paul quotes later in Romans, none is righteous. No, not one.
So you have a perfectly holy judge and a totally guilty defendant.
Exactly. And that is the terror of this verse. If the phrase the righteousness of God just means God's standard of perfection, then we are all in massive trouble because none of us meet the standard.
This was Luther's problem, wasn't it?
This was Luther's absolute nightmare. Before he understood this verse, Martin Luther was a monk in Germany, and he was arguably the best, most intense monk who ever lived. He prayed for hours on end. He fasted until his body literally broke down and he fainted. He slept in the freezing snow without blankets.
He was confessing all the time, right?
He confessed his sins so often and in such exhausting detail that his superiors eventually got sick of him and told him to go away and come back when he actually did something wrong, like murder someone.
He was just trying so hard to earn it.
He was trying to scrub his soul clean, but the tragedy was the more he looked at his own heart, the more sin he saw. He realized that even his good works were motivated by fear of hell or pride in his own discipline. So when he read the phrase, the righteousness of God, he heard the punishment of God. He actually admitted later, I did not love a just God, I hated him.
Because if God is strictly just, Luther is doomed. We all are.
Right. That is what Dr. Nichols calls the failed solution. The scales approach, trying to outweigh your bad deeds with a bunch of good deeds.
Dr. Nichols uses the mirror analogy here, which I think is brilliant.
It's a perfect visual. Imagine your face is covered in mud, just caked in dirt. You walk up to a mirror on the wall. What does the mirror do?
It shows me the mud. It shows me how dirty I am.
Right. But does the mirror wash your face?
No.
Can you take the mirror off the wall and try to use the glass as a washcloth to get the mud off?
I mean, that would be incredibly painful and totally ineffective.
That is the law. The 10 Commandments are a mirror. They show us, hey, you shouldn't lie, and we look at it and realize, oops, I'm a liar. They reveal the dirt, but they have zero power to remove the dirt. Luther was basically trying to scrub his face with the mirror.
Wow. So what is the actual solution? What did Luther finally find in verse 17?
He found the gospel solution. He had this massive breakthrough. He realized that Paul wasn't talking about the righteousness God demands from us. He was talking about the righteousness God gives to us.
Wait, say that again? That's the pivot point.
It is the pivot point of the universe, really. The righteousness of God in this verse is not a standard we have to exhaust ourselves trying to climb up to. It is a gift that comes down to us. It is a legal status. God takes the perfect historical record of Jesus, his perfect obedience, his boundless love, his sinlessness, and he credits it to our empty account. He wraps us in it.
It's called justification.
Yes. So when God looks at the believer, he doesn't see the mud anymore.
No. He sees the perfect righteousness of Christ. It is a completely one-sided transaction. God provides exactly what he requires. That is, I mean, it feels like cheating.
It does feel like cheating to our pride.
Yeah.
But it is grace. It's scandalous grace.
Yeah.
And that is exactly why Paul wasn't ashamed. He realized, I don't have to be good enough, smart enough, or powerful enough for Rome. I have the very righteousness of God gifted to me.
And the text says, from faith to faith.
Which just means the whole engine runs on faith. You don't start with the empty hand of faith to get saved and then suddenly switch to earning it to stay saved. You start with the empty hand, and you keep your hand empty all the way to glory.
Dr. Nichols closes this whole section with one final image that I think just completely lands the plane for us. The drowning man.
It's a very visceral image. Imagine a man falling off a boat into a rushing, freezing river. The current is way too strong. He is swallowing water. He is going under. What does a person do instinctually in that moment?
He fights. He kicks. He thrashes around.
Thrashes. He tries to swim against the current. He tries to keep his own head up. He is exerting maximum human effort. But the terrifying part is the effort isn't saving him. It's actually exhausting him faster. He is drowning while he fights.
I know.
Then someone on the shore sees him and throws a rope, a life preserver. Now, here's the absolute dilemma of the gospel. You cannot hold the rope and continue to thrash at the same time.
You have to choose.
Yes. To grab the rope with both hands, you have to stop trying to swim. You have to admit, I can't do this, my effort is failing, and clutch the one thing that actually can pull you in.
Yeah, thrashing, that's us, isn't it?
It really is. Think about modern life right now, the burnout we all feel, the hustle culture, the constant, exhausting need to curate a perfect life on Instagram or LinkedIn, the need to be seen as a good person politically or socially. We are all thrashing in the water. We are working ourselves to death trying to justify our own existence, trying to prove to the world that we matter.
And the gospel steps in and says, stop.
The gospel says, grab the rope. The righteousness you want so badly is a gift. You don't have to earn it. You just have to hold on to it. Stop thrashing.
That is incredibly freeing. But it's also hard, right? Because we really like to be in control. Thrashing feels like I'm doing something about my problem. Grabbing the rope feels like total surrender.
It is total surrender. That's why it takes humility to be saved. That's why the seed looks weak to the proud Roman. That's why the ambulance looks ordinary. But it's the only thing that actually pulls you out of the river.
Man. So let's recap these 4 pillars because we've covered a ton of ground today.
It's a dense text.
It is. So gospel courage. We don't need to be ashamed because the value of the message is infinite. It's like striking oil in your backyard.
Right.
Gospel capacity. The power to save is in the message, not the messenger. Drive the ambulance. Don't stress about being the surgeon.
Exactly.
Gospel coverage. It's for absolutely everyone. Jew, Greek, the good kid, and the guy with the terrible town reputation.
The empty hand is the only requirement.
And finally, gospel content. It gives us the righteousness we could never earn. It is the rope for the drowning man.
That is the complete package. That is the good news. And when you see it laid out like that, you understand why Paul could stand in the shadow of Caesar's palace, surrounded by all that marble and military might, and say, I'm not intimidated. Caesar had armies. Paul had eternal life.
Dr. Nichols wraps up the sermon by bringing us all the way back to that tiny seed we talked about at the beginning.
He does. He reminds us that the life is contained in the seed regardless of what the surrounding soil looks like. You can mock the seed. You can bury it in the dark. You can ignore it completely. But the power to create a forest is still in there.
And he gives a very direct charge to the listeners. He says, carry the seed. Take it into your workplace. Take it to your family dinners. Take it to that neighbor you're honestly a little afraid to talk to.
And don't edit it.
Yeah.
Don't try to polish it up and make it cool for the culture. Just plant it. Drive the ambulance. Let God handle the actual results.
And then Dr. Nichols does something very specific at the end of the manuscript. He gives a direct gospel call. And I want to echo that here right now because we never know who is listening to this deep dive. He quotes Romans chapter 10, verse 9.
It's a direct personal appeal to the person listening who is tired of thrashing. If you are listening to this right now and you feel exhausted spiritually, mentally exhausted from trying to be good enough, stop. The invitation is to confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead.
As Dr. Nichols says in the text, salvation is not about being good enough. It's about grabbing the rope.
It's the empty hand. Just receive the gift.
That is a profoundly powerful place to land, from guilt to glory. Well, we have unpacked a lot today. I hope this discussion has moved the needle for you, not just intellectually in your head, but personally in your heart. I want to remind you again to check out faithfultotheword.com. This entire deep dive was based on just one single session from Dr. Nichols. There's a whole ongoing series on Romans there, plus a ton of other resources to dig into.
And again, a quick reminder that Faithful to the Word Ministries is a 501c3 organization. If you want to help get this exact seed out to more people across the globe, you can make a tax-deductible donation directly on their website. It supports the production of these sermons, the writing, the outreach, all of it.
And speaking of writing, we have a very specific recommendation for you today. Dr. Nichols has a brand new book out. It's called Between Two Trees.
Oh, it's a fantastic read. Highly, highly recommend it. It traces the whole biblical storyline from the tree of life in Genesis in the garden, all the way to the tree of life in Revelation, with the cross the tree of Calvary standing right in the center. It really helps put the whole narrative of the Bible together in a way that makes sense.
You can pick that up directly at faithfultotheword.com as well. Buying the book is just another great way to support the ministry and feed your own soul at the same time.
Definitely go grab a copy.
So here is my final question for you, the listener, as we sign off today. What stood out to you from this deep dive? Was it the ambulance analogy? Are you putting way too much pressure on yourself to be the surgeon when God just wants you to drive?
That's a huge one for a lot of people.
Or maybe it was the rope. Maybe you realize today that you've been thrashing in the water for years, trying to prove yourself, trying to build your own righteousness, and it's time to just let go and trust the rescuer. Think about that this week.
And ask yourself, who do you know in your life right now that needs the ambulance?
Don't edit the message. Just drive the ambulance. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.